They thought no one would speak, that the cries of little girls stitching handbags in windowless sweatshops would never reach American ears. But one woman, bold, furious, unapologetically real, shattered that silence. Jasmine Crockett didn't just challenge power. She exposed it. And the moment she said Ivanka Trump's name on live television, the world stopped breathing. The story opens with tension rising in Washington, D.C. Jasmine Crockett, a bold Texas-born congresswoman, walks into the Oversight Committee chambers. With a file so explosive, her own aides begged her not to carry it. It's early morning. The marble floors echo beneath her heels. The world outside still clueless about the fire she's about to unleash. This is not just politics, this is personal. The file she carries is thick, bound in red. Inside, names, dates, photographs, children from Bangladesh and Honduras, age 10, 11, 12. Some smiling weakly under fluorescent lights, others visibly injured, their small fingers wrapped in bandages from stitching, designer goods labeled Ivanka Trump Collection. And it wasn't just sweatshops, it was a system. One buried under NDAs, offshore factories, shell corporations, and quiet White House protection. Jasmine has never been one to blink in the face of power. We flash back to 6 months earlier. A whistleblower, a former supply chain auditor, had slipped her the first batch of files in a parking garage just outside Dallas. He had trembling hands. "They'll come after me," he whispered. "But the world needs to know what they've done to those kids." Jasmine sat with that information for days. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew if she moved too fast, the story would die in spin. She needed evidence, irrefutable data, and a moment of maximum impact. She wanted to tell the story not with charts, but with voices. She reached out to human rights activists, former child workers, and global labor watchdogs. And what she heard was devastating. One girl, Aisha, just 13, told her story through an interpreter. She worked 14-hour shifts. Her eyes burned with tears as she described being beaten for missing a stitch. The warehouse had no windows, no brakes, no safety measures, and when she collapsed from exhaustion, her body was dragged outside and left on the loading dock like trash. The label on the boxes she packed, Ivanka Trump, elegant by nature. Back in Congress, Jasmine built her case piece by piece, emails and internal memos, photos, shipping logs that linked specific Trump family business accounts to banned suppliers under federal scrutiny. But still, her team feared she'd never get airtime. Mainstream networks were hesitant, afraid of lawsuits. But she had one chance, a live televised oversight hearing where Ivanka's name had been floated in connection with overseas contracting. The chamber is packed, cameras roll. Jasmine breathes deeply and begins. Her voice cracks as she begins to speak, not from fear, but from fury. "Today," she says, "we stop pretending that wealth justifies cruelty." She slams the folder open, one by one. She lays out the evidence, a photo of a bruised child, a payment slip signed by an Ivanka Corp affiliate, a whistleblower statement. The room goes silent. Suddenly, Representative Jim Jordan interrupts her. "This is political theater," he snaps. She doesn't flinch. "I'm not here to perform," Jasmine says. "I'm here because a child begged me to tell her story, and I will." Then the name drops. Ivanka Trump. The audience gasps. Jordan tries to silence her, but she keeps going stronger now. Ivanka Trump profited off the blood of children, and if Congress won't act, the people will. Live TV, viral, explosive, backstage, someone rushes into the Trump campaign headquarters and whispers in Donald's ear. Within minutes, Trump storms onto his Truth Social live stream, red-faced ranting. "Who the hell does she think she is? Jasmine Crockett is lying," he screams. "Ivanka never hurt anyone. This is fake Democrat garbage." But his hands are shaking because deep down he knows it's true. The fallout from Jasmine Crockett's explosive revelation echoes like a thunderclap through the heart of America. The news cycle erupts. Cable news anchors can barely keep up. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all flood with clips of her testimony. Hashtags trend overnight. Hashtag IVANKA exposed. Hashtag Crockett vs corruption. Hashtag child labor profits. But in the middle of that storm, Jasmine isn't celebrating. She's pacing the floor of her dimly lit office, hands trembling not from fear, but from knowing the hardest part is still ahead. Because the face she can't stop seeing is Aisha's, not the headlines, not the politicians, but the child who never asked for fame, just for someone to care. 2 days after the hearing, Jasmine's private line rings. It's a call routed through 3 international relays. On the other end, a voice barely audible. It's Salma, another child once forced to sew clothes in silence. She's now 19, free, but scarred. Her voice shakes as she asks, Did they hear us? Jasmine swallows back her tears. They did, and they're listening. Behind the scenes, Ivanka Trump's PR team scrambles. Lawyers are called, statements are drafted denying everything. "We are shocked and saddened by these unfounded allegations," Ivanka says on Fox News, her voice calm, carefully rehearsed. "My brand was committed to ethical sourcing. Any violations occurred without my knowledge." But Jasmine isn't She has the emails. One leaked message from Ivanka's personal assistant in 2016 reads, "Cost needs to go lower. If Bangladesh gives a better margin, switch suppliers. I don't care if the stitching isn't perfect, just get them made." And another, "No press about labor. Use non-English contracts. We'll handle the rest." In court filings, the Trump family lawyers argue that these are fabricated or taken out of context. But a forensic data team confirms that headers, they came straight from Ivanka's archived business account. As public pressure mounts, Jasmine flies overseas secretly to meet the girls who once labored in silence. She visits a dusty, crumbling building outside Dhaka. The air smells of chemicals and dust. A local journalist guides her to a back room. There, in flickering light, a group of young women sit cross-legged, sewing by hand not because they want to, but because it's all they know. They pause when Jasmine walks in. Aisha, now 15, steps forward. She's older now, but her eyes still carry the weight of stolen childhood. She shows Jasmine her hands scarred, thin, fingers bent from years of repetitive injury. "I made 20 bags a day," she whispers. "And I was never paid." Jasmine kneels and holds her hand. "I promise they'll never ignore you again." Back in the U.S., conservative media attacks intensify. Tucker Carlson posts a video titled, "Jasmine Crockett, Liar or Lunatic?" Sean Hannity asks if she has a personal vendetta. Marjorie Taylor Greene tweets, "This is what happens when the radical left gets too much power. They come after our women, our businesses, our truth." But Jasmine doesn't flinch. Instead, she releases the factory footage. Its horrifying video, captured by undercover activists inside the offshore facilities, shows children coughing in fabric dust. One boy faints. Another child burns her hand on a faulty press machine. There's no first aid, just a slap and a warning. Work faster. The camera pans over a shipment label, Destination U.S. brand, ITC Ivanka Trump collection that night. The video airs on MSNBC. Rachel Maddow goes silent mid-broadcast, eyes glassy with emotion. Public outrage explodes. Protests break out. In front of Trump Tower, hundreds hold up photos of the children. One sign reads, "Their hands made her fortune." Meanwhile, Donald Trump can't contain himself. On a live call-in to Newsmax, he rants uncontrollably. Jasmine Crockett is a disgrace. This is a witch hunt. Ivanka is innocent. These kids are probably paid actors. But as he rages, something deeper brews beneath the surface. A federal investigation is launched. The Department of Labor quietly issues subpoenas. The House Ethics Committee reopens a dormant case file on Trump Organization shell vendors. International watchdogs line up to collaborate. And behind closed doors, a former Ivanka Corp executive reaches out to Jasmine's office. He wants immunity. In exchange for everything, he says. She knew. She always knew. She just didn't care. Back in Dallas, Jasmine sits alone in her office late at night, the city lights flickering beyond the glass. She replays the hearing in her mind, the voices of the girls, the shaking hand of the whistleblower, and Trump's furious denial. But most of all, she hears Aisha whispering, "Thank you for not letting them forget us." 3 weeks after the factory footage aired, the golden nameplate outside Ivanka Trump's Manhattan showroom was quietly removed. No press release, no goodbye. Just silence, like a chapter erased. But for Jasmine Crockett, the storm was still roaring. Her office became a war zone, flooded with death threats. Calls from lobbyists, anonymous warnings telling her to walk away before it gets darker. But Jasmine didn't enter politics to be comfortable. She entered it to make noise where silence killed, and nothing had ever screamed louder than this. The House Oversight Committee calls a special emergency session. Front-page headlines across the country read, "Ivanka subpoenaed. Trump family faces new labor scandal. Crockett's case opens international investigation." The world watches as Ivanka Trump walks into the hearing room under subpoena. Her face is blank, designer cooled, but her fingers twitch nervously. Jasmine Crockett sits across from her, calm, composed, but fierce. The nation holds its breath. "Miss Trump," Jasmine begins, her voice unwavering. "Are you aware that your company's contracted manufacturers employed children as young as 9? Ivanka hesitates. "I was not directly involved in supply chain oversight." Jasmine slides forward a document, a signed memo bearing Ivanka's initials and handwritten edits on a contract renewal for Bangatext Ltd., the very supplier exposed in the factory footage. "Is this not your handwriting?" Jasmine asks. Ivanka falters. The room stills. Her lawyers lean in, whispering. She says nothing. Behind the scenes, a second whistleblower comes forward, a former logistics coordinator. He provides customs clearance forms, showing Trump brand shipments routed through blacklisted ports to avoid scrutiny. The pressure builds. CNN runs nightly panels. Human Rights Watch releases a 74-page report titled, "Branded in Blood, the Cost of Ivanka's Global Empire." But it's not just about documents anymore. Jasmine arranges for Aisha, now safely relocated with a visa and full legal protection, to testify remotely before Congress. The hearing room falls silent as her image appears on the screen. she speaks, softly but clearly. I was 13. I worked in pain. We were hit. We were hungry. We never knew her name. We only knew the label. I never thought Americans would care. But now, I believe someone hears us. Members of Congress wipe tears from their eyes. Even political opponents sit still. That night, Jasmine Crockett becomes a symbol not just of resistance, but of reckoning. The story shifts. No longer about partisan politics, no longer about left versus right, it's about right versus wrong. Trump's response? Predictable. On a stage in Iowa, he bellows, "This is all fake. The deep state wants to destroy my family. Ivanka is a beautiful woman, a mother. They're using this Aisha girl as a prop." But his rage only confirms what America now suspects: he's losing control. Within weeks, the Department of Justice issues an indictment, not just civil, but criminal charges against Ivanka Trump and multiple executives of her fashion brand. The charges include knowingly violating federal labor laws, falsifying import documentation, and conspiring to obstruct a global supply audit. The courtroom becomes the new battleground. Jasmine testifies again, not as a politician, but as a witness for the voiceless. Her words are etched into history. This is not a war against wealth, it is a war against cruelty, against the normalization of child suffering for the sake of fashion, fame, and profit. No American brand, no matter. The name on it should be built on broken bones and silent screams. Outside, people gather in the thousands. Mothers holding photos of children, activists from around the world, former child laborers standing together, and as the trial nears its end, a final secret document emerges, a handwritten note from Ivanka found in a personal archive. It reads, "Cut costs now. Don't ask questions. They're just overseas kids." It seals her fate. Ivanka Trump is convicted, fined hundreds of millions. Her brand is dissolved. She walks out of the courthouse, eyes downcast, surrounded by a wall of cameras. The Trump family empire, once built on gold towers and whispered power, now carries the permanent stain of child labor and human exploitation. But the story doesn't end with scandal, it ends with change. Jasmine Crockett, now a national figure, launches the Children's Dignity Act, a sweeping piece of legislation banning any U.S. business from sourcing products in known human rights violation zones, without criminal liability. It passes with bipartisan support. Aisha, now living in the U.S., starts school, her first real education. In a tearful reunion, she hugs Jasmine and says, "I thought no one in America saw me. Now, the world does." Months have passed since the courtroom echoed with the final verdict. Ivanka Trump's conviction shocked the nation, but even more startling was what followed: a national conversation America had long avoided. For decades, Americans had worn fast fashion without asking who paid the price. But now, names had faces, labels had meaning, and justice, for once, had a heartbeat. Jasmine Crockett stands before a sea of students at Howard University. She's been invited not as a politician, but as a guest lecturer in human rights. Her voice is steady, but her eyes scan the crowd for one familiar face. Aisha is in the front row now, 16, wearing jeans and sneakers, with a quiet confidence that only recently returned to her. She takes notes with intensity, her hand no longer trembling, no longer broken. Justice is not a moment, Jasmine says to the crowd. It's a lifetime of holding power accountable, no matter how golden their towers are. If no one had listened to a 13-year-old girl sewing in silence, Ivanka Trump would still be profiting. But one voice cracked the silence. One story changed everything. The auditorium erupts in applause, but Jasmine doesn't smile. Instead, she folds her arms and takes a deep breath, because she knows this fight is far from over. Meanwhile, the ripple effect stretches far beyond America. In Dhaka, Bangladesh, the factory once associated with the Trump label has been shut down. Where there were once dusty halls filled with underage laborers, there's now a community vocational school open with funds raised by human rights organizations and the Children's Dignity Fund, a nonprofit launched in Aisha's name. A plaque outside the door reads, "To the children whose hands told the truth the world refused to see." Across the ocean in Honduras, labor inspectors have raided warehouses previously shielded by political immunity. Over a dozen arrests have been made. Girls once forced to sew in silence are now testifying freely. One of them, Maria, says in a BBC interview, "When I heard about the American woman who said our names in their Congress, I cried. I never thought the world would say our names back." Inside the U.S., Trump loyalists still shout into microphones, calling it all a hoax, a deep state setup, a smear campaign against a good woman. But for the average American mom standing in a Target aisle holding a handbag, there's a pause now, a second thought, a moment of conscience. That's the revolution Jasmine hoped for. And Trump, he's retreating, not defeated, but wounded. He now refers to the scandal only in vague terms. That thing with my daughter, it was all political. Lies, all of it. But even his base has quieted. Because deep down, even they couldn't look away from those factory photos. From those hands. From that truth, Ivanka, now banned from managing public-facing brands, lives in quiet exile. Her social media is inactive. Her company's legacy erased. But the internet never forgets. Every search of her name now links to words like exploitation, child labor, cover-up. That's the power of truth. And Jasmine, she's not done. She files a new bill, the Global Labor Transparency Act, which requires every U.S. retailer to publicly disclose their overseas supply chains. If they want American dollars, she says, they'll meet American values. The bill passes in the House. Slowly, painfully, the world is changing. One night, Jasmine sits in her apartment alone, sipping tea, reviewing photos from a recent trip to a reopened factory in Kenya. This one, clean, union protected, filled with adults, paid fair wages, is a vision of what's possible. She opens an envelope. Inside is a crayon drawing from Aisha, two girls standing in sunlight, holding hands. Behind them, a handbag lies, in the dirt, torn open, empty. At the bottom, 3 words, "We are free." Jasmine wipes a tear, because that's what justice looks like. Asterisk 5 years have passed. The world has moved on. New elections, new headlines, new controversies. But in the corners of the earth where shadows once silenced children, something remarkable has taken root. Hope in the heart of Baltimore, a new school opens its doors. The sign above its gates reads, Aisha International Academy for Labor Survivors. It's not just a school, it's a sanctuary for young girls rescued from global exploitation. There are sewing machines here too, but now they're tools of healing. Girls learn fashion design, not forced labor. They stitch dreams, not dollar signs. Jasmine Crockett cuts the ribbon herself. Cameras flash. The crowd cheers. But in that moment, her eyes search for one familiar figure in the audience, and there she is. Aisha, now 21, stands tall, wearing a deep blue blazer, a pendant around her neck in the shape of a needle broken in half. Jasmine hugs her. Neither says a word, because some victories don't need sound, they just need presence. Across the ocean, global corporations have adopted what economists call the Crockett Standard. Brands are now graded on labor ethics. Shoppers demand it, investors track it, countries legislate it. Factories that once beat children now beg for ethical certification, because one voice in Congress said they are not invisible. In Texas, Jasmine is no longer just a congresswoman, she's become a movement. Schools teach her hearings and ethics classes. Law students cite her fight as precedent, mothers name their daughters after her, but she never lets it get to her head. I wasn't brave, she tells a reporter during a quiet walk through her district. I just couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent. And what of the Trumps? Ivanka lives in obscurity, her empire reduced to legal battles and sealed interviews. Her name, once etched in gold, is now an asterisk in labor history. Donald Trump rarely mentions the scandal anymore. Even his most loyal followers changed the subject, because the image never left them. That little girl, bleeding fingers, sewing a handbag she'd never afford. In silence. Now her voice echoes forever. In Washington, a sculpture is unveiled, in front of the Capitol. It's made of steel, copper, and broken leather straps, twisted into the shape of a young girl holding up a seam ripper like a torch dot at the base. Engraved in bold letters, to the children whose labor built luxury, to the woman who tore the silence, to the world that finally listened. The camera fades out, and in the background, Aisha's voice plays softly over the final scene. I used to believe my pain didn't matter. Now, it's part of history, and history will never forget. The sky above Washington is heavy with gray. It's not raining, not yet, but the air feels like it remembers everything, as if even the clouds are holding back tears. Inside the Capitol, a private ceremony is being held in the Library of Congress. The room is quiet, no cameras, no press, just a circle of people whose lives were forever changed by one thing, truth spoken out loud. Jasmine Crockett stands before a small wooden box, sealed with red velvet lining. Inside it, a collection of items that once exposed an empire printed. Emails, photographs, fabric tags, statements. This is not a burial, it's a time capsule, a warning, a promise, never again. And yet not everything is as peaceful as it seems, because somewhere in Manhattan, in a hidden corner of a glass skyscraper, a sealed document lands on a mahogany desk. It's marked Confidential Sealed Settlement Exposed. A former Trump Corporation data engineer, long silent under NDA, has uploaded a final archive, one that was never meant to surface. And what it reveals is darker than anyone imagined. Jasmine receives the file via secure email at midnight. She opens it in her apartment, alone. Her eyes scan fast, disbelief tightening in her chest. Line after line, contracts signed not just by Ivanka, but by her father. Hidden accounts linked to supply chains that trafficked underage workers into armed conflict zones. These weren't just underpaid kids, they were child soldiers, orphans, displaced war survivors, funneled into factories as cheap, voiceless labor in Ivanka's initials. All over them, Jasmine slams her laptop shut. Her hands are trembling. She rushes to her living room window, stares into the cold night. For the first time in years, she feels something she thought she'd conquered. Rage, raw, shaking, human, because this wasn't just corruption. This wasn't just luxury. This was war crimes hidden behind pearl necklaces and perfume ads. The next morning, Jasmine returns to the Capitol and confronts the Department of Justice directly. Unseal the files, she demands. The world needs to see who built their empire on blood. But powerful forces push back. Lobbyists appear. Threats resurface. A leak attempts to discredit her. Old mugshots from her college protest. Days are circulated. News pundits whisper, "Is Jasmine becoming obsessed? Is this personal now?" And the answer is yes. It's always been personal. Because when she testified that first day, she wasn't just speaking for Aisha. She was speaking for every girl who never made it out. Every child whose last breath was exhaled inside a windowless factory making bags for women, who would never know their names. Now, Jasmine has one last card to play. She schedules a live, national address. No press questions. No debates. Just one woman, one podium, one truth. The broadcast cuts into prime time. People across the country from New York to Atlanta, from Oakland to Oklahoma, stop scrolling. Aisha sits in her apartment, holding a mug of tea, watching journalists hold their breath. The White House is silent. Jasmine begins. We thought the scandal was over. We thought the truth had already been told. But the final file has arrived, and it reveals something none of us wanted to believe. She speaks plainly. Not like a politician, like a mother, like a fighter, like a woman who has carried the weight of the voiceless too long. She shows footage, never before, of child workers surrounded by armed guards, weaving products labeled Trump signature, and then she drops the final blow. The Trump organization didn't just ignore child labor, they weaponized it, and the world let them. The screen fades to black. Social media erupts. The next day, The Hague International Criminal Court files an emergency motion to review human trafficking charges linked to U.S.-based fashion brands, naming Ivanka and Donald Trump among those under international scrutiny. The scandal that began with a sewing needle now threads its way into global courtrooms. Protests erupt again, but this time they're different. Silent, candlelit, names of the lost read aloud in parks. Former child workers flown in from half a dozen countries, holding up signs that read, "We are not your brand. We remember everything. Thank you, Jasmine." Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett walks into Congress and drops a final bill, the International Child Justice Act, a permanent law that bans all U.S. business transactions with companies linked to labor crimes, past or present. Violations carry criminal charges, no exceptions. Not for wealth, not for status. The bill passes. Unanimously. For the first time in modern U.S. legislative history, not a single vote is cast against it. And now, it's your turn. The screen fades, and a message appears. If this story moved you, don't just scroll past. Speak their names. Share their stories. Every time you buy, ask where it came from. Every time you vote, ask who they protect. And every time someone says, it's just business, remind them, business built on pain is no business at all. Like, share, subscribe, demand justice. Demand change. #WeAreJustice.